I divorced my wife after she confessed this in therapy. My wife and I have been married for about 12 years now. Our marriage has been the best thing that has ever happened to me since I lost my parents. My parents and I were pretty close while I was growing up. I was the first and only child my parents had, and I think that kind of contributed to our closeness. My mom would often take me to parks during the weekends, and we would have such fun that only she could provide. She would get me everything I needed, and the only time she got angry with me was when I didn't do what I was supposed to. That didn't happen often, also because my mom and I had this kind of bond and I hated making her angry or mad at me. My dad was not as present in my childhood as my mom was. The reason was because he was a journalist and his job required him traveling from one place to the other. Sometimes, I wouldn't see him for about 6 months. But the good thing was that whenever he was home, we spent such quality time together, and that accounted for his absence. He would always take my mom and I to places we loved, and we would spend time telling each other stories. My parents told me stories about how they met and some of the mischief they did while younger. I enjoyed listening to them because it was fun imagining how they would have been while they were possibly my age. It was safe to say that my parents were literally my best friends. I was an introvert while growing up, and it was quite difficult for me to have friends early. During those periods I couldn't talk to anyone at school. My parents were my go-to. Once I returned from school, I would tell my mom all about my day, what teachers were nice to me, who did something to annoy a teacher, who didn't do their assignment, and other things like that. When there was a new boy at school, I told my parents about him. There was something about this new boy that sparked curiosity in me. I wanted to know more about him immediately when I saw him. I told my parents about this and asked whether it was normal or not. They assured me that nothing was wrong, and Jason would go on to be my best friend in years to come. Such was the kind of cordial relationship that existed between my parents and me. But as it is said, good people and things do not last forever. While I was in high school, I lost my dad to a plane crash. He had been on his way to cover the news, but the plane had suddenly developed some kind of fault midway in the air. Long story short, my dad was gone. I cannot begin to recount how pained I felt when this happened. My mom became a shadow of herself. She was no longer the happy mom I grew up knowing. She couldn't eat as much, and it wasn't too long before she also passed away. As the years passed after my parents' death, my relationship with Jason became stronger. He knew literally everything about me, and I also knew things about him. Sometimes, I would go over to his house when I got tired of living with my aunt. His parents were very receptive to me and accommodated me for every time I went over. In no time, I became the other son they never had. I moved from spending the weekend with them to moving over to their place. My aunt met them as well, and she was comfortable with my staying with them. Jason and I went to the same university, and we promised that we would get married on the same day. Now that I look back to those times, I cannot help but laugh at how we thought everything in life would go according to our plans. After we graduated, our paths started getting separated. Jason went into the publishing house while I went into journalism. Truthfully, my dad had always encouraged me and made journalism enviable. I had made the decision since I was younger that I was eventually going into the field of journalism. Things went well for Jason and I. Jason had always been one who worked hard. You could commit anything into his hands and rest assured that nothing wrong would go on. That was just the way Jason was, and this was the same way he treated his work. In no time, he became a favorite of his boss. He got himself a good apartment and a very good car in 2 years of working at the place. My workplace wasn't bad either. I met my wife, Jenny, in my second year at work. Of course, it was during a seminar I had attended. It was a workshop for journalists, and my boss had insisted that I attend the workshop. Jenny had been one of the facilitators and really enjoyed the way she taught. She simplified everything, and in no time, everyone was able to get the gist of what she had in mind. I didn't think that our paths would cross after that time, but I guess the universe has its own way of connecting people. I saw Jenny some months after the workshop, and surprisingly, she recognized me. What started as an official conversation would later graduate into what in later years would lead to our marriage. Before we got married, we dated for some months. During this period, I got to know that Jenny wasn't in my field, unlike my previous thought. In fact, I discovered that she was a vet doctor.